Hi everyone, I'm Jeanette Mulvey, the Content Director of CO by the Chamber of Commerce. Welcome back to CO Roadmap for Rebuilding. This series is aimed at helping you recover and grow your business. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Today we're talking about managing your team. In the first half of this event, we'll share strategies for keeping your team motivated and engaged. And in the second half, we'll talk about the hiring and onboarding process, what that looks like now, and how that's going to change in the future. As we go along, you can answer our poll questions and ask the speakers questions of your own by using the box on the right-hand side of your screen. Before we get started, I want to thank our event sponsor, ADP, and our supporting sponsors, FedEx, MetLife, Square, and Staples Connect. We appreciate your partnership in this series. We'll start today's discussion with a conversation on leading efficient teams. Amy Freshman, the Senior Director of Global HR for ADP, is here to share her advice with you. And we also have two small business owners who are joining us to offer their perspective. They are Rachel Kruppa, the founder of Kruppa Consulting in New York City, and Elena Ledoux, the CEO of Superb Maids in Las Vegas, Nevada. Welcome to all of you.
Hi.
Excited to be here, Jeanette.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Hi. Amy, I'm going to start with you. So we're living through a time where we're seeing, dramatic shifts in the way business owners lead their teams. What are the three biggest trends you see on the horizon for businesses looking to run more efficiently now and in the future?
Thank you, Jeanette. It's a great way to kind of kick off the conversation. There are lots of studies and surveys and a lot of research that's been done. We at ADP have the Adp Research Institute, and we pushed a press release last November. It actually lists 5, so I do encourage everyone listening in today to go and see the full readout. There are 3 that I think are really applicable, and I want to highlight here. The first is a focus on resilience. So for all the business owners out there and thinking about what are your employees looking for and what do we need to ensure that you're thinking about and figuring out how to provide, employees are really looking for safety while becoming more resilient. So believe it or not, over the last 12 months, most have become more resilient, even though many have gone through really, really difficult times and continue to. There's a keen focus, though, from a trend perspective on health, wellness, safe environment for employees to work in. By the way, safe environment applies whether they're visiting an office and going back, or maybe we're essential all along, but even those working at home. So, and working remotely. So that's a big area of focus. The second is fuel for flexibility. So we chatted a little bit before we got started. We've just performed the biggest remote work experiment ever. And I think the headline is quite clear. Remote work works. We don't want to live and work in the means that we're working in today, having said that. So we've pushed the envelope for employees to try it. And at the same time, we've really, most employers, if not all, have been thrown into the how-to with remote work overnight. The past year has proven that it can work, which has really been the fuel. So that's part of where that trend comes from. I'll just read quickly the Adp Research Institute study. 44% of employers now have official flexible work policies in place, which is up from 24% pre-COVID. So just a stat alone to kind of show how organizations have really shifted. The last is agility in action. So that agility piece it's about business models really changing and adapting. There's a survey that we've done on small and medium-sized businesses. Among more than half of small businesses are making adjustments to their business model and or already have. So I think it's very clear that from a trend perspective, these are 3 areas that employers should really be thinking about.
So let's talk about that. We've been forced into this change, and we've had to adapt to this new world of remote work and hybrid work. For managers, this is a new situation where they have to learn to manage differently. So what types of management techniques are you observing that are working well in managing in this new workforce?
Yeah, it's, I've said it in many conversations, remote work, virtual work, dispersed teams, these are really not new concepts for a lot of organizations. Depending on the size and the industry and what the associates and what the employees are doing on a day-to-day basis. What we've seen really come to a head and really help leaders over the last year specifically is, first and foremost, it's building relationships. So those one-on-one conversations, you can call them check-ins, the ability for managers to really check in with their associates and with their employees has been really critical. Empathy is a big one. So we talked about it a little bit in that everyone's living a different place in a different life. What I mean by that is so many are dealing with childcare issues, elder care issues, health issues, and just concerns all around. So having that empathy from a leadership perspective and for business owners out there listening in, empathy goes a long way. Another management technique that I think has worked quite well for many organizations that I've either worked with or clients that we have is leveling the playing field. So pre-COVID times, I actually worked for a leader at the time where 3 of us were remote, right? Lived in different places and weren't in the main office, but 3 were. And so one of the things that leader did that really stuck out at me is when we would run team meetings, not all of them, but many of them throughout the year, she would actually have us all have an equal experience. So we were all remote. So I think that for me as an employee, she really showed that she wanted to do what she could to level that playing field. And the last one is, in today's world, there's a lot of difficulty and concern and fear. And we talked a little bit about safety earlier on. It's to make sure we recognize that there's some great things happening. We can have fun. We can celebrate successes, small wins, big wins, personal wins, professional wins. But those are some key areas, Jeanette, I would say, that have helped leaders stay connected to their team and manage their workforce.
Thank you, Amy. Before we go to Rachel and Elena, I have one more question for you, Amy. As we move forward, it's clear that we won't revert back to what work looked like before the pandemic. It will be some kind of new hybrid situation. So, what can leaders, but especially small business owners who are running their companies, presumably with this in this new environment, how do you make sure that your team is being efficient and engaged, even though they may not be together all the time? You gave a great example with leading the meetings, but some other examples.
Yeah. So engagement is, I think it's always been a hot topic and something that's really critical when we think about how much employees are able to give and contribute to the organization. There's pieces surrounding loyalty, et cetera. I do call out quickly, Adp Research Institute did some research across 19 countries, all about engagement. So what are the big factors? 2 biggest factors. Number 1, whether or not you're part of a team. And so that can mean different things for people. So either I see myself along an org chart, right? That's one, but that's not really what it's getting at. What it's really getting at is, do I feel like I'm part of the team? And by the way, that team could be 3 people or it could be 300 people. So that team environment, if employees indicate or feel that they are part of a team, they are 2.3 times more likely to be fully engaged. So that's the money. That's where we want to get to. The second area is, and biggest factor, is whether or not you trust your leader. Extreme trust means 12 times more likely to be fully engaged. So Jeanette, to answer your question around engagement, I do encourage folks to go and check out the research specifically, but those are really the 2 biggest factors. When we talk about maximizing efficiency, I think about things like, we've been forced to challenge the status quo over the last 12 months, no question, right? So business models shifting, adapting, and changing. I would ask and recommend for the business owners out there to continue to challenge that status quo. We have business owners who do everything, right? Or have a very small staff where people are, yes, they have different roles and different titles, but essentially everyone's doing a lot of the same things. I would look to the team. I would have business owners to look to their team to say, how can we do this better? I don't pretend to have all the answers, and we've got two small business owners here that we'll hear from in a moment. Having the employees who are doing the work and maybe sometimes a little bit closer to the work, they might have a fresh perspective. So I would also encourage business owners to do that. Lastly, Jeanette, I would say be connected to your employees. We talked about, some of those check-ins and some of those best practices. There's a long time term that I've heard for as long as I can remember. Happy employees make for happy customers. I think that is still true today and probably will be for time to come. But think about how you, as a small business owner, can really engage your associates and be connected.
Great, thank you. That's a perfect place for us to jump over to Rachel. So hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. So Rachel, you run a PR firm. You have offices in New York and LA, and you have other employees in other parts of the country. You're all remote right now. But I know that culture is a huge part of what has made your PR firm successful. So tell us, how have you managed to maintain that company during this time and going forward?
Yeah, it is, talking and leaning back on what Amy was saying, it is really much of creating connection through Zoom, connection through the virtual world. Something that we have instilled is, every Monday we have a team check-in, but we don't start with work. We're talking about how everyone's weekend was. We're talking about what are the small things that made us happy. They're called Motivational Monday, and it could just be a 10-minute conversation about something that's new on Netflix, and everyone chimes in and everyone gets excited. So we have that, and it's more of like touch base. Let's get ready for the week. Let's celebrate. Let's see everyone's faces. And then the other thing that we've really engaged with is on Thursdays, which is really important. It's called Tune In, and we're doing one today. And we find different people that we put down our computers from a work perspective, but we engage and connect with each other. And that is whether it is, we had a singing lesson because we also realized during Zoom that we have horrible voices together. So we had a singing coach come on and teach us how to sing. We've done everything from have a therapist talk to us during really the hard times, during the pandemic, of just what we should expect and how we're feeling and how mental wellness is so important, to having influencers in different media to educate us. We also had a professional coach to help us be more productive with our clients, so that we're talking, but it's how do you read body language and use your hands while on Zoom? So we're looking at things that we can educate our team with, that then they feel empowered, but also have that personal connection.
That's great. Thank you. Now, Elena, you're in an interesting situation because your teams, though all based in the Las Vegas area, have sort of always been remote in that most of them don't work in the office, they work in the field. So you have about 30 employees, but most of them are in the field, and you have a super strong company culture. So how all along have you been maintaining that company culture?
Company culture was always kind of a goal for us to build a really strong culture, and it's a subject of experiment. It's like a moving target. I don't feel like we'll ever get there where I'm going to be, this is it, this is perfection, right? It's work in progress, and we experimented a lot. We even bought office building. I had a fantasy of, showing up in the morning cooking pancakes for my team, and then I realized that's not what they want, right? So after we bought the building, which is fine. We've tried all kinds of different things, but ultimately what worked really well for us is to just leaning into our values, because this is how we hired people and that's how they think already. So our values is honest, simple, clean. And our whole mission is to build the American dream. A lot of our employees are immigrants, and myself including. So we're able to provide kind of safety for our employees. We're able to provide benefits for our employees. We offer health benefits. We offer first home buying assistance to them. And in fact, some of our employees are they were doctors in their home country, right? We had professors. We had all kinds of interesting professionals. And sometimes I find them still working for us 3 years later, and I say, hey, when are you going to take your license, to be a doctor again? We really nudge them to move forward, even if it means that we're going to lose them at some point. This is a really strong culture, and sometimes it doesn't mean that everybody gets together and does something fun or great, as much as that's the kind of ideal thing that I see in my head, but just to reinforce it against every single employee, every single interaction, I feel like that creates ultimately the sum of all of this creates this really strong culture. One of the things that we do in our company, which may or may not work for others, is like any one of my employees can fire any client on the spot. They don't need to ask for my permission. If any client is disrespectful, racist, sexist, hateful, or just plain weird and creepy, you can just put your hand up like this and walk out, and then text us, and our staff will just call them. And if I have to call them, I'll call them myself and fire them. So they don't use it too often, but knowing that the power is in their hands and not in the hands of customers, that's very empowering. And that puts kind of our action together with our words. Just because I'm saying I'm empowering you guys, that doesn't mean anything unless they can do stuff like that. They also tell us when they want to work, if they have anything going on. Just like Amy was saying, happy employees make happy clients and happy work environment. I found that people who are sad or stressed out or would rather be somewhere else with their family, like a kid's recital or something, they're gonna do a really bad job cleaning. So I'd rather them take that time off and do that and then come back when they're ready and when they're happy. And that's kind of like, again, just by acting in their favor, acting to reinforce those values is what creates that culture.
Wow, thank you so much. Rachel, one of my favorite questions to ask during this pandemic has been what kinds of changes you've made in the way you communicate with your team that will become permanent for you. Do you have some examples of that?
Yeah, we have, or me personally, have like more check-in one-on-ones. We use Slack a lot, so it's even slacking of like, hey, how are you feeling? And it's also through our like virtual team connections on Mondays and Thursdays that I also can see just people's faces, just like being able to read like nonverbal cues, not just like the physical cues or when someone comes to you, just be like, hey, how are you? And having those like really meaningful check-ins or texting them and being like, hey, really great job, so that you continue to have that one-on-one connection, but also people can see that their work is being done and appreciate it. That's something that we've always done, but it's a little bit more fine-tuned and personalized now more than ever.
Thank you. Elena, you guys it was determined that you are an essential business. So, but that came with a lot of other issues, which involved having to be there for your employees in terms of their safety concerns. Can you talk about how you managed all of those concerns?
Yes. First of all, when it kind of hit us, really, when the shutdowns started happening and quarantines, and it was a mass panic. I spent probably the first 2 weeks in like curled up in the fetal position and not doing anything. So, but afterwards I said, okay, it's time to start researching. I owe it to my team to come up with solutions, come up with the information. I think lack of reliable, clear information was one of the biggest obstacles for us as business owners. So I started researching some of the things that we didn't know is medically, is it really safe to be even out there, to be outside of your home or to be inside somebody else's home? So that's a number one thing that I needed to research. And I spoke with doctors, I spoke with researchers, I spoke with nurses, first responders, all of this to get that information that's unbiased and real. And then the secondarily is from kind of humanitarian reasons, like if my employees are laid off or taking a time off, what kind of sustenance can they rely on? Are there any benefits? And I know there are some benefits that eventually came out, but all of the unemployment systems were down, right, in many states because they're overwhelmed. So realistically, I felt like if I tell them to just go and take a break for 2 months or 3 months or 6 months, I'm going to basically be tossing them on the street and they're not going to have any money to feed their children. A lot of them are, have families too. So that needed to be researched and really confirmed, verified. I had to read online, go on Reddit, go on Facebook and see if people are actually getting benefits, and they were not. So that was a factor in that went into making my decisions. And what was going on in terms of making those decisions, what I started doing, we use Slack a lot, and so I would record a video every day of myself thinking like, okay guys, I am also scared, I also don't know what's going on, but this is what I found out, right? And then the next day is the next thing. This is what I found out now. So then I said, like, you tell me, what shall we do? You always had that freedom to decide when do you want to work, who you want to work with, who you want to work for, right? So now is that time again to you tell me, as long as you want to keep working, keep going. It seems to me right now you won't be able to get the benefits, but there are customers who still want us, and we are essential. So those three things go into my decisions. But again, if you feel like you're scared, if you feel like you have somebody who's high risk, it's okay. You know, we'll take you back. You can sit it out. We'll pay you whatever we can. The government will pay you whatever they can when they can, right? We'll do it together. We even had a pantry inside our office, right? So you can come and get the food for free. Like there's certain things we could do, we would do. And then people were saying, overwhelming majority said we want to keep going. Let's go, right? So in that way, it's not like us forcing them. It's a collective decision.
Right, exactly. Rachel, I'm going to come to you with the first Q&A question, but before I do that, we're going to do our audience poll real quick. So audience, it's time for you to take our first poll, and we want to know what's the most important quality of a cohesive team these days. And you can select your answer on the right side of the screen, and I am going to, looks like flexibility is the first one. I'm having a little trouble seeing it, so you guys are going to be seeing it better than me, but it looks, there we go. Okay, so it looks like, yep, company culture, efficiency and productivity. So I think we all agree that flexibility and adaptability is a key thing right now. I'm going to the audience Q&A. Rachel, I'm coming to you first. I think this is an interesting question. Where are the biggest efficiency breakdowns for your team in a virtual world, and how have you been addressing those?
Yeah, it's communication, because you're not, it's communication, and then also making it open so that people can ask questions. I think the communication is that people need to be able to feel that they can ask questions without feeling that it's a stupid question. So you always have to have those like open door policy in regards of like, ask more questions now, because then we're able to do this together, or ask for help. And that asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And that is, I think, like the number one thing that you can always tell your team.
Amy, thank you, Rachel. Amy, this person says, what is the key to keeping employees motivated and connected to the business when they don't see each other in person?
For those that came from a space pre-COVID, where they went to an office every day and they were physically around people every day, the transition is very hard. So let's just call it what it is. Not only is it hard to just go remote under the circumstances that we've all been living just adds to it. I think Rachel said it. We use video. So just a side note, I've been with ADP a long time. I spent about first half of my career office-based, but I've been working from home since 2007. It's show my age when I say 2007. So I've lived both worlds, and I will tell you that having access to video technology has really been a game changer for all remote workers. So our ability and my ability, even just now, to see all of you, I see facial expressions, I see nodding, I see smiling. When you can't physically be together, video is the next best thing. My only other add is not everyone is comfortable, and video fatigue is definitely a thing. So I don't force it on anyone, but if I'm having a one-on-one with someone, I'll nudge them pretty well to say, let's get on video. I want to be able to see you, right? Full screen see you. It's really all we have right now. So I would really encourage employees, business owners, if possible, and if you have access to the technology, have your team connect using video. It really will make a big difference.
Thank you. Elena, I'm coming to you. This person says, I love that you've really focused on your company values. Did you find that you had to sacrifice skill or competency in employees, I guess, for that? So in other words, like, are you focusing less on analyzing people's skill sets just to make sure that there's more of a cultural fit?
We do actually. That's probably the number one factor that we take into consideration when we're hiring, whether it's for admin. And I run several small businesses actually, and across the board. I always say it's easier for me to teach somebody how to clean the toilet as opposed to somebody with a bad attitude. To even if they're amazing at cleaning, they're a professional cleaner. It's really hard to change that attitude. And sometimes when I witness a candidate or even an existing employee displaying certain behavior, I ask myself, is this the kind of stuff that their mom should have taught them or me? Right? So it's like, if the answer is their mom, that's not a job for me. If their mom couldn't do it for 40 years, who am I to say, that I can fix that? So I'm not even going to take on that project. That's not for me. I'm just going to move on to somebody who already has built-in qualities, who's very neat. Even during the hiring, I always say, look at how they present themselves, look how they behave, because that's unintentional. How does their hair look? How do their clothes look? How do they speak? How do they look you in the eye? Because if that's how they're going to behave with their job too, and that's something that even if you force them to do a bad job, they can't, because that's their DNA, is to be very thorough, very meticulous, right? And so it's much easier to go with the wind, with the current, as opposed to against it and retrain somebody against their natural traits.
Got it. Right. Thank you. Rachel, one more for you. I love this question, and I think it's particularly apropos when we're all on Zoom together. This person says that you have to, developing the ability to make small talk is a skill. Have you found any techniques for being good at just making small chit chat, now that you have to be more conversational with people on video?
Yeah. I mean, luckily, I have a PR agency, so communication is not an issue for most people. But it is like finding that common ground for us. It's like really getting to know our clients in general. So when we start working with someone, we have like a questionnaire that is like a non-traditional questionnaire that we have them fill out. So we already get some of like those backside of like if they collect anything, if, where they were born, so that we have questions. But I think it's always going back to what people love. It's weather. It's being like, hey, how was your weekend? I think there's also just like talking about, because everyone is, not necessarily always talking about the news in regards of the pandemic, because there's also COVID fatigue, there's pandemic fatigue. So you want to make sure that you set the tone for the meeting to be positive. So it's like, let's talk about, oh my gosh, isn't the weather so incredible right now? Or how was your weekend? Or, there was this great TV show, because those are the things that commonly bond us together, or talking about food, or talking about wellness, because then it sets the tone for a meeting to be great. And also is like that minor chit chat before you actually start diving into what you need to get done.
Thank you. That's great. That's actually all we have time for in this segment. I'm going to say goodbye to Amy and thank you. Our small business owners are going to stay with us. And I am going to introduce our next guest, who is Larry Kidd, President and CEO of Think Hire. Hiring new employees can be one of the biggest challenges for small business owners, and that's what we're going to talk about now with Larry. So Larry works with companies that are recruiting and hiring every day, and he's here to share his insights with you. Rachel and Elena will also share their hiring experiences as well. So welcome, Larry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Jeanette.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so Larry, as businesses have found new ways to operate over the past year, they've also seen a lot of change in the way they recruit new employees. So what are the most important and lasting changes to recruiting that you've seen come out of the last year?
Well, clearly the technology has been a key factor in the changes. Pre-COVID, we made several changes to accommodate online applications and did a little bit of online onboarding, but not to the extent once COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we went full bore. We implemented online applications for all our applicants, online interviews. We outsourced our drug tests, which we were doing them in the office prior to COVID. And we just became more mobile friendly and more accessible and more accommodating. For those that just couldn't work the technology, we would actually apply with them online. We would do it ourselves and, basically do it verbally over the phone. And we just had to pivot and, adjust.
Right. Can you tell a little bit more about the common factors that employers tend to overlook while hiring new employees, especially in this virtual world? There's a lot, like Rachel was talking before about being able to, I'm sorry, Elena was talking about being able to read a lot about a person when you're with them in person. And now that it's virtual, what kind of employee qualities do employers tend to overlook when they're hiring?
Well, I agree with Elena. We have really lost quite a bit under the virtual world. We are in the people business. Obviously, employment staffing, employment work is a people-to-people business, and we lose that personal touch. It's just it's just hard to connect virtually. At least it is for us. So what we do is we make bigger and better efforts to connect with employees. We are very cognizant of the cultural match, not only for us, but for our clients. COVID or pre-COVID, that part didn't really matter, but it's harder to pick the cultural part up in a virtual interview. And, we've lost the ability to collaborate over the water cooler. Quite frankly, we just can't get together like we used to. Have those 5-minute side chats. So what we have done is actually have virtual meetings every day, which is not something we had done in the past. Maybe a little overload for some of our employees, but it's been helpful. They've been able to collaborate somewhat. And once a quarter, we try to get together in person. We spread out, we wear masks, we socially distance. Unfortunately, during the holidays, we had to cancel our holiday party, but we did it virtually and did the gifts exchange virtually, and everything seemed to work out. But we are very cognizant about keeping our morale up. Because people working remotely and at home, frankly, they get a little lonely and feel isolated. So we do what we can to keep them, all part of the team.
Thank you. One of the silver linings of the pandemic, of course, is that now companies that previously only had local employees because they were all reporting to the same office now can recruit really from all over the country from a much larger talent pool. And you've assisted a lot of clients in doing just that. So can you talk about how the way companies are recruiting changing? And as a follow-up to that, kind of what are the 3 things you should consider if you're suddenly deciding to open up the locations you're willing to hire from nationally?
Well, you're absolutely right. It's opening up not only nationally, but internationally. So employers that never had the opportunity to even think about hiring an employee, we live in Ohio, in California, can now do so and very effectively, or in Indonesia now. It's completely changed the world that we live in. But so the pool has suddenly gotten much, much bigger. And then, quite frankly, the talent situation was a challenge pre-COVID. It was very, very difficult to get quality and people. It's truly an employee's market right now, and it was before, maybe the last 3 years. But this allows us to go into markets that we've never been in before. With that, we get the benefit of longer hours. If we are, on the East Coast time, we're in Ohio, we now get to take advantage of West Coast time. So we gain an extra 3 hours for our recruiting if we choose to pick somebody on the West Coast or in West Coast time. And sometimes you see better productivity with the folks that are working remotely. So there's definitely a benefit with that as well. So yes, we've seen quite a few changes with the remote recruiting, and it's been very beneficial for us.
Now, a lot of companies, especially small businesses, when they hear the word recruiter, they think expensive, and most small businesses don't have a big budget. Can you just talk about how can they stay competitive with bigger companies that are hiring with recruiting, but on a small budget?
Absolutely. One of the things you have to consider are the state laws. So if you are going to recruit or hire somebody in a different state, be cognizant of what those state laws and local laws are, because they very well will be different than what the laws are in your state or your county or your city. and every state operates differently. So you have to be very, very aware, of that. There are some growth opportunities that, could be with some of the costs that you would consider. The business also needs to consider, with a remote person, there are inherent costs where you would think brick and mortar would be more expensive. You still have the cost of computers, travel if you want to bring the person in for an in-person meeting, home office, those type of things. And then does your business allow remote work? If you're a business with, plumbers and you have to be on site, you're not going to be able to do remote work unless you, outsource or do remote work with perhaps the call center. So those are other items you have to consider before going remote.
Right. Thank you. Larry, I'll come back to you during the audience Q&A. Right now, I'm going to go to Rachel. Rachel, we have talked about this idea of needing to get a feel for the prospective employee's energy and cultural fit within your company during a virtual interview. So can you talk about how you do that?
Yeah. What I do initially from the first call is making it a little bit more personal. I have their resume in front of me, so I know their work. So it's more of talking again about getting personal, talking the light stuff of TV or, the weather, but like, what are your love? Like, what are your favorite foods? Like, then you can kind of see someone like open up, because like first time, especially on Zoom, people are really nervous. They're going to have a shaky voice. They're going to have a shaky hand. They're going to somewhat be like, it's just like more nervous, and you can't necessarily always see the nervous energy of like a foot twitching. So for me, it's like making sure things are personal. But then after that, what we do is just like, once we have a conversation, we also talk about work, and we talk about like, wins and like where they feel like they did their best and what they're looking for. But also the second interview process is with my team. So it's like 2 or 3 people from the team, where it's not necessarily always talking about work. Again, it's talking just to see how the dynamic works from a Zoom perspective of, is there like kind of this like weird energy shift, or are people having a conversation like they're friends? Because I think in our type of industry, like having the rapport and having like the chemistry and like the culture is important. So we're always, team first, client second, because if you don't have a strong team and a strong working force together, then you're not going to have great client work. And so that's what we do, is just like get the team involved, but make it a personal interview, not so, what are your skill set? Here's this, here's that. That's important, and you still have to talk about that, but it's making it a little bit more fluid and making it feel more warm and fuzzy, and not so, I'm here to interview you.
Right. Thank you. Now, Elena, you talked about giving your employees the flexibility to work when they want to and not work when they don't want to. And that means that you are hiring all the time, because you're always accounting for people coming and going. But you have a fantastic process for hiring and getting a lot of information out front and streamlining it. Can you tell us what you do?
Sure, we had to put a lot of effort into our recruitment process because we're competing against hotels and big casinos here that pay double the starting rate of what we're paying. And we still have thousands of applicants who want to come work for us. So both in terms of attracting them and sorting through them and keeping them, I think it's a really important process for us. So what we do is there is an application that we post, for example, not application, but a job ad, and it's written almost like a dating profile, where we don't tell you what we require from you. We tell you what we have to offer for you, right? Including like home buying assistance, including like how we care about you, how we're not going to toss you in the street the minute time goes rough, So all these things to attract them to click through. And when they click through, they go to our home website application page. And on that page, again, it's a sales pitch in the first paragraph. And then there's a little video of me, just no lighting, no nothing, just me talking for 19 minutes, answering all of their questions in their head, what it's like to work for us. Because it's a life-altering decision is to take a job with a new company, especially a small business. So I'm telling them, this is what we are. This is how we got started. This is what we're thinking about. These are our values. this is what it's like to scrub a toilet, so, and these are rules, right? And so these are benefits, and this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is how we're trying to get you to build your American dream. So all of that, even to the point where you get up in the morning, like you got your calendar the night before, you get up in the morning, you get in your car, you drive, like, so kind of paint that picture for them, so it's not as unknown and scary. So all of the questions they normally have are answered in that video. And I made that video on a whim after I got tired of explaining the same stuff over and over to someone. People like, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I just recorded it. It's on the website. After they watch the video, then there's an application that's rather lengthy, but it screens out like, are you actually axe murderer or not? So there's a lot of like fine questions like that. And then after they answer all of that, then they go into the next stage, which is a Zoom interview by our office assistants in Nicaragua. Actually, she will actually make sure that, I know you said you're not an axe murderer, but are you really, right? So it's like all these like key disqualifiers. Do you really have a car? Do you really have a right to work in U.S.? Can you really pass the background check? Because we will check and the references check. So after they pass, then they go into in-person interview and we give them a micro task because we want to see their agility. Can they move? Can they clean like one table, right? Are they gonna clean the toilet with a dirty rag and then put that rag on top of the counter? It's like immediate disqualifier. So little things like that. And if they pass that, then we'll hire them for 2 days. Because I always tell them it's such a scary decision to commit to a new company, and for us as a company to commit to a new employee. Because you're gonna find out they all sound amazing during the interview, and they all say like, I wish I had found you like years ago, right? They all want to work for us, but within 48 hours that you work with them, you find out all kinds of stuff that didn't emerge during the interview. And so then you wish you had that undo button. And so I always tell them, we even have a little explainer too on that on our website saying like, we'll hire you for 2 days. We'll pay you officially. We'll put you through our whole process. But in 2 days, both we and you will make that decision whether we can work together or not, right? So it's like a additional, and I even tell them if you have existing high-paying job that you're not too happy about, keep that job. Find the 2 days. We'll accommodate which 2 days that is. Come work for us. And if we love you and you love us, then we'll proceed to the next stage. So immediately it takes that whole like stakes down. You have to risk everything, risk your family's future, and just try us out. You see what it's actually like to scrub a toilet, in somebody's home. So that's our process.
That's great advice for anyone running any business. We are going to do our next audience poll in a moment. So audience, you can get ready to do that. Rachel, one question for you. We've talked about managing, we've talked about recruiting, but we haven't talked about onboarding. Can you tell us a little bit about how you are managing to onboard employees all across the country and keep everybody focused on what, becoming a part of your company culture?
Yeah, one of the incredible silver linings of this pandemic was updating that. Because we realized that we didn't necessarily have like a really great onboarding document. So we spent time and actually created, it's I think now like 4 pages of just onboarding of here's all the documents that you need, here's your team. And then we have one of like the oldest members of our team in regards of like longevity within the company do an initial conversation of just like, here's like everything that you need to find. Here's the essential document. So it's like every single thing that you need, logins to Wall Street Journal, logins to New York Times, it's all in one place. And then we have breakouts with every team lead, or if they're a team lead with like the teams, and like we're part of that too. So it is setting up almost like micro meetings so that they feel successful, but we also have more flexibility or more, I think empathy is, what we heard earlier was from like a standpoint of things are not going to get going as fast as like when you're in real life. So you have to be more patient with, the team, but then ask and check in more. I have like a weekly call with any new member that's starting so that it's just like, how are things going? Like, what questions do you have? Is there any hiccups or is there anything that we can explain better? So it's making sure that we're aligned and we're organized internally before someone can start to fill that role. That's like the biggest thing that we found. And we've onboarded now 4 people or 5 people during the pandemic. And I actually feel it's better than when we were in real life.
That's great. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked and now can't be overlooked during the pandemic when people are remote. Before we go to the poll, I just want to tell the audience a secret about Elena. And that is that her company was a Dream Big finalist. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce has our annual Dream Big Awards, and Elena and her company were a finalist last year. And this year, our application has just opened again. So if you or a company that you know would like to apply for our Dream Big Awards program, you can do that starting today. I think we're going to put a link for that in the chat, and also it should be on the page below the screen where you're watching. So I hope everyone considers applying. There's a pretty big prize there, so it's definitely worth the time. And you'll be in good company with Elena. So I am going to take us to the poll now. And this is a word cloud. So let's see on the right-hand side of your screen. What is the first quality you look for in a job candidate? So tell us that now. We know for Elena, it is not that they know how to clean a toilet, because that's not the most important thing. Honesty, personality, attitude, competence. I see motivated, genuine, enthusiasm. I like enthusiasm. That's one I always want to feel like the person wants to be there. Reliable, friendly. I guess we see honesty, attitude, personality. Those are the big ones. That's great. I'm going to move us to the audience Q&A, and I am going to start with Larry. You mentioned recruiting internationally, and we got a question right away from someone who said, what are the most important considerations when starting to recruit internationally?
Well, you need to understand the culture of the country you're working with. So if you're recruiting in, I'm from southeastern Ohio, so if you're recruiting in whether it be Great Britain or India or China, the culture is going to be completely different. So you need to be not only understand, but be respectful of those. Obviously, you have the time difference that you'll need to be cognizant of, and the cost. So, in London, it's clearly going to be more expensive than it is in parts of India or China. So those are probably three things I would consider.
Great. Rachel, I'm going to come to you with this question. We haven't really talked about diversity, inclusion, and equity, but we should. So this person is asking, are employees asking you more about how you're handling that at your company? And how are you responding to that question?
Great question. And I think it's definitely something that needs to be talked about every day, if not within your company. That we early on, just during the pandemic and then during BLM, felt it. And so I took advantage of the conversation and brought in a lot of different individuals to help me learn, but then also did the work of, reading so many different books and going through to do the work myself. But from us, it was just like, we need to definitely, have more diversity within our team. And so it's not necessarily always looking at what our normal recruiting is. It's like, we use a recruiter or we use these job boards. And it's like, okay, where do we go? And what are the other job boards that we need to look at? For us, it was just like Colored Com is like a really great job posting from us from a PR perspective to list our job. It is doing the work in order to find the talent that you need, because we work within the same pool of people that, we talk to. And that's just like how it just has been. So you have to diversify and you have to do the work in order to know how to hire and recruit from a diverse background, but it's not going to be easy for you. It shouldn't be easy. So it's just asking questions. It's doing the deep dive online. It is, asking and going on job boards yourself and asking those questions. So I think that hopefully that helped answer the question.
Yes.
But it's doing a lot of the work, and you have to have a diverse team, because in our perspective, if we don't have a diverse team, then we're not getting the perspective of all of our clients' customers. And we're leaving out a large sector of who we can be speaking to.
Yeah. So thank you. And I think that leads to this next question. And I'm really glad somebody asked this question, because I was actually sitting here thinking about this before the question came in. And I'm going to ask Elena. So we've all talked about company culture and wanting to recruit people that we think fit into our company culture, but this person says, but can't that cause a problem when to create an inclusive and diverse workplace, because they almost sound like they're working against each other. Like you have to seem like one of us to fit into our culture, but then how do you create diversity? So I want to ask Elena that question because you have such a strong company culture, but you've also said that you are hiring people who are immigrants and from all different backgrounds. So you're managing to balance those two things. Can you talk about that, Elena?
Yes, I think you have to separate whether or not somebody can be your friend versus you can work well together and produce a great output. So I always say, listen, we can be the bestest friends outside of work, right? I can really like you, but if you can't produce, what we have is actual objective metrics for each employee and all across all of my companies. Every employee has specific metrics they have to hit, and then they're very objective. So it's nothing to do whether I like you or your coworker likes you, your immediate supervisor likes you. They cannot like you, but if you're hitting those performance metrics, KPIs, then you get advanced. And actually, we have a career ladder that they get on day one. There's 5 ranks, and your compensation is tied to that. And there's key performance indicators. And yes, it comes from my nerdy personality, right? But it's very fair, and it's not subjective where it becomes like, oh, this person is exactly like me, so I like them. Let me hire them. Let me promote them. I used to do that, and that didn't work out well. So now I don't do that. I'm like, even with clients, same thing. I can say, dear client, you're very dysfunctional. We cannot work together. And they ask me, well, can we still have lunch or coffee when we're in Vegas? I'm like, by all means. We can still be friends. I still can like you a lot. I just cannot work with you. And I think when you make it impersonal like that, separate work from personal, right? Then people don't get offended and they accept it because it's fair, right? It's like, can you do the work or not? That's all.
Right. That's very helpful. Larry, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this company culture question because I'm sure you are talking to customers of yours every day who need to recruit a cultural fit, but that's a very hard thing to define and quantify. So what is your take on how you find people who are a good cultural fit, but still create a diverse employee base?
Yeah, Jeanette, that is a challenge. Whenever we meet a client and sign a contract for the first time, we always encourage a site visit. So we'll go out to their facility and meet with them, whether it's a distribution operation or manufacturing or even a financial institution. And we'll ask a lot of questions. We'll walk around the facility. We'll ask some of their employees questions and try to assess the cultural fit and understand it and truly understand it, because sometimes even the hiring manager doesn't understand their own culture, or at least they can't quantify it and verbalize it. So we go in and we'll take a look at it, and then through our interviews and our onboarding, we'll make sure that we make that match. We'll pick out key components to the cultural fit. Sometimes that can be a challenge because you don't always get it right. But, as Elena said, for us, it's about culture. That is probably the most important thing in the match. We have several clients that said, you know what, I really don't care about the skill set as long as I hit a minimum. I care about the personality fit and the culture as long as they have that it factor. So we work very, very hard to make sure we make that marriage match.
Got it. Thank you. I am going to ask Rachel this question, but maybe also Elena, because I think you both could answer. And I've never heard this question before. So this person's wondering if you've seen a lot of people who are making a career change during the pandemic. And so, Rachel, for you first, they say in the past, like a cohesiveness in employment history was important. Do you feel that that's changed in this climate? Are you more open to people who are making a career change right now, or is it not relevant?
For us, it's not really relevant because for us, it's more of relationships with the media and editors that they have. But there is definitely a lot of change. And I think a lot of the change, just talking from friends and other like business owners that I know that were more in the event space, because you have a lot of incredible event producers and people that have like a really robust like set of skills and relationships but they do events and they don't know what to do with now. So from us, it's looking at that if we were to have a role for, say, a strategic partners, position or executive, that's what we would consider would be someone from events, where it doesn't necessarily have to be, a cohesive resume in order to have that person be part of the team. But for our purposes, it is an experience within the PR and media landscape that what we need in order to hire someone.
Sure. We only have a couple of minutes left. So actually, I'm going to do a lightning round. I'm going to come to Elena first. And my question is, Elena, what 2 technologies could you not live, that you must have during the pandemic, could you not have lived without in terms of running your team during the pandemic?
Slack and Zoom.
Great. What about you, Larry? What are the 2 you guys are really relying on?
Well, reliable internet is clearly one of them, and a smartphone.
Okay. And Rachel, you're going to get the last word on this.
I'm sticking with Elena, and it's Slack and Zoom. It's 2 things that you just need now more than ever. And then you need Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
So I'll tap in like one of Larry's. I'm going to do 3. Sorry.
Yeah. That is all we have time for. So first of all, I want to thank you, Larry, Rachel, Elena, and Amy from earlier. Thank all of you. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. This was a great episode of Roadmap for Rebuilding. I also want to thank our event sponsor, ADP, and our supporting sponsors, FedEx, MetLife, Square, and Staples Connect, for helping us bring this program to you today. Now, please join us for our next event in this series, which will be next Thursday, April 1st at noon Eastern Time. That will be a roundtable, a co-roadmap roundtable on building a diverse and inclusive team, which we talked about today, but we're going to really dive into that and give you some really tactical tools on how to do that. And in the meantime, you can check out the website I run for the Chamber, for resources that are especially curated for you by looking at the bottom of your screen, and they'll be coming to you in your inbox as well. And please let us know how we did by taking our audience survey on the right-hand side of your screen. That's it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Together we will recover and rebuild. We'll see you next week.